this is one of the free vehicles that you can pick up in the season pass, and it is really fun to play, and it is, considering that it is a tier 8 heavy that relies on armor, pretty much tells you that this is not what you would usually expect from a tier 8 heavy, mainly because most tier 8 heavies don't particularly have that much armor, whereas this one does rely on having that armor so that it can use the side scraping rear-mounted turret that is so good about this vehicle, and why it is really good to use. And we're going to see 2 gameplays in this video, so stay tuned for those because they're really interesting bits. One of them is going to show you kind of what that kind of clutch situation where there's loads of people trying to fight you all at once, and the other one's going to show you kind of the top level, what you can do with this tank, even considering that it's a rear-mounted turret and with its 6 degrees of gun depression. Now, straight off the bat, let's have a look at the way in which we've set the tank up. Now, we've gone with advanced loading. This is primarily just to boost the damage per minute, since it isn't insane. We've gone with advanced optics so that we can get better view range, because we want to make sure that whatever is hitting us from the distance is going to be able to get spotted by us, which is good. And then we're running with a gun stabilizer for improved accuracy. You could potentially swap out the vertical stabilizer for something like traction system, or maybe you go with improved ventilation, whatever it might be. Either way, we went for the gun stabilizer just for kind of the generic better accuracy, so we can just pinpoint weak points, lock them down their tracks, and then, you know, deal with them however we need to do that. But, of course, that's not the only thing about this tank. Well, this tank has 1500 hit points, which is, you know, fairly okay for a tier 8 heavy, even though the German tier 7 Tiger has more hit points. But then again, that tank is completely different from the usual. Either way, this tank has 2742 damage per minute, which for a tier 8 heavy is actually very good. It is really nice to have that on a heavy tank, mainly because, you know, you get the accuracy that's not bad either, 0.29, but with the damage per minute makes this tank very usable. And considering that you have 320 alpha damage, it's not the highest, but it's in that kind of nice region where you end up not sacrificing too much of your reload to have the higher alpha damage than a lot of the mediums, but you also don't sacrifice having too long of a reload where you feel like you're useless in some positions because, you know, the opportunity to get multiple shots in just doesn't arrive, etc. And you can't go for those tracking shots, whereas the Chrysler K can do that. It also has a really nice top speed, and you pretty much maintain that top speed quite well as well, 35 kilometers an hour, and that's down to the power to weight ratio of the vehicle being 20, which is pretty good for a heavy tank. I mean, if you were to consider some of the other heavy tanks at tier 8, you would see a significantly worse, I think. So yeah, there you go, the T77 with 16.3, and then the T34 here with 12.44, so it's considerably better. And from the traditional heavy tanks that you're used to seeing, it is probably about 50% better than most of the heavy tanks at tier 8. So it's really nice to have that, maintains that speed really well over various different terrain types. So yeah, it's just a really nice tank overall in terms of its stats, but the armor is what kind of makes this tank somewhat usable. Now, it isn't as good as it was on PC when it was first released. Of course, the pure thing about the Chrysler K is that it relies on having that armor to make the tank work, but the problem with the Chrysler K is it is just like a flat penetration kind of bouncing tank, whereby you can't do a whole lot if someone just has super high penetration, because no matter what you do, they can go through the lower plate because it's only, what, like 184 millimeters. It's not that well angled either, so it is quite flat. So people can pen it with about 220 pen, which at tier 8 is basically anyone's premium rounds, and often that is actually just standard rounds going through the lower plate of the Chrysler K, which I'm not against. I think tanks should have a frontal weak point. It's why consoles frontal armored tanks are usually fairly okay at being able to deal with when you're playing in other vehicles that aren't just heavy tanks with super thick armor. So yeah, I think that that's a good way to go. but it is a weak point. However, some people can bounce off of it, and of course when you're wiggling and stuff like that, people can miss and hit your tracks, or maybe they hit it at a weird angle and then they bounce. But primarily you will get penned in that lower plate. So how do you combat that? Well, when playing the vehicle, you can of course hide that lower plate by just getting in front of something. And that means that you are then having to penetrate the upper plate if you're an opponent, which is much, much harder. It is still pennable by a lot of tier 10s that you might meet. Tier 9s with premium ammunition will go straight through the frontal upper plate of the Chrysler K, but it is, you know, super high premium rounds. And so, yeah, I think for the most part, it's actually fairly good, and you can pull off a few bounces, but you shouldn't rely 100% on your armor to make it work, as with every heavy tank in this game. Basically, you have to think a little bit when you are playing your heavy tanks and just try and make it as difficult as possible for them to pen you when you're reloading and that sort of thing. So yeah, either way, the Chrysler K's armor, pretty good, but not insane. It does have a cupola on the top of the vehicle that is pennable, and the frontal cheeks of the turret, although they are, you know, fairly strong because it's rounded, and it means that it gives it an angle to basically anyone that's shooting at the turret, because, you know, circle, and there's always a perpendicular point on the circle, because, you know, cylindrical turret, means that people can pen this quite easily when they do have super high penetration, and I do mean fairly high penetration, but at the same time, if you're coming up against tanks that maybe don't know where to hit it, it is the bottom of the turret. You don't want to be hitting the top of the turret because it angles in, because it's like a dome. It obviously, the angle at which, you know, you're going to be hitting the tank's armor gets significantly higher when you do get further up the turret. So you don't want to be hitting right at the top of the tank, you want to be hitting right at the base of the turret to be able to pen it with premium rounds. So yeah, basically any standard rounds are going to bounce off of it, and of course the cupola has what, 177, but it's quite well angled, so it can still pull off bounces, but yeah, you are going to get penned in the turret occasionally. So just don't poke tier 10 TDs, or don't poke tier 8 TDs with penetration that seems good, or, you know, the typical tanks where you think, that tank has quite high penetration, I probably shouldn't just sit out in front of it and let it be able to aim 100% at my turret. So that's kind of how this tank plays. Let's see how it actually works in game, because of course it is the season pass tank that you can pick up at level 100. Of course, this is not the skinned version. The skinned version is the HMH Chrysler K. They are the same tank, it's just this is the Heavy Metal Heroes version of the vehicle, I believe. So yeah, or Her Majesty's Hero, I don't know. Either way, it's just basically a skinned version. It has this nice camo, it looks cool. You don't have to pay for camo, I don't believe, on the HMH Chrysler K, whereas you do with the Chrysler K that we're looking at. But either way, let's jump into the game, see what it's all about, and see whether or not it's actually worth grinding all the way up to season rank 100. The first game then that we do have today is played on Sand River. Sand River is a really, really nice map for basically every tank type. It doesn't really matter what you're playing. I really enjoy this map. I think it's very, very good. And I generally think that most people can have good games in this map if they follow one of two kind of principles when you are playing, which is that don't go over ridge lines when there's people literally sat there watching you, and try not to YOLO in on your own. So that is basically the two principles of this map. If you do that, you can have much better games than you probably already do if you do those two things. Which is good advice for basically every single map, but if you do it on this one, you can die very, 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 very quickly in the game. So don't do that. Don't be a bot, and just make sure that you, you know, stay aware of your surroundings when you are deciding what you want to do. But obviously, as coming into this position, what we can do here is we can get hold down. And by that, I mean, you can't necessarily in terms of the traditional sense where you get a rock in front of your lower plate, blah, blah, blah. But what you can do is you can pull back far enough from the ridgeline where you can essentially stop them from being able to see their lower plate because they're below you, and you can also then increase the angle of the upper plate because you're kind of wedged up. You can see I'm on an incline here, which makes it even more difficult for people to pen me when they do try and attempt to hit my lower plate, which is obviously what we want. This is kind of the best case scenario when it comes to using your armor, and considering that no one else has gone over here, or at least like no one has taken this kind of middle position, it's quite safe here. Like, people have to full on YOLO you, and if people are full on YOLOing you to be able to take you out, they often lose all their hit points, or you know, it hasn't been worth it for their team to do so because they're just going to get hit by everyone in the base. Now you can see here we're going for the LHM. We want to get the light tank out of the game, or one of the 2 light tanks out of the game if possible. But when we're provided with free damage in the KPZ-50T, this is kind of where you want to be. Easy damage as you like. There we go. Unfortunately not managing to hit that second one, but get the you know, either one of these guys out. Managed to hit the Ragnarok here, which is nice, and we're up to about 2,000 damage. This is kind of what I mean by using the armor effectively, and there you go. We've blocked 960 damage, which is about 60% of our hit points, to be honest, in this game, which is pretty good going, and you can kind of expect that when you are playing this vehicle. It does really work quite well. And I think most people kind of assume that you can't, you know, push in, you can't do a whole lot because the side armor is not particularly great. And yeah, it's true, the side armor of this tank is pretty bad. You do get penned very easily when people do find it, but at the same time you can get quite a nice few shots. That LHM's obviously triggered from earlier where we hit him. Don't quite know why he went full on YOLO mode in, but I guess no one else punished him. Maybe we'll get some revenge on him in a bit, but going for the teeth breaker here, bit of a bad aim. Should have aimed slightly lower on that one and we would have been able to hit him, or at least increases our chances further of being able to hit him. But so far, game's gone very well. We've basically dominated the middle of the map. The enemy team didn't really push us over here, so all good, and we should be able to do another shot of damage into the 50 TP, aiming for that cupola. We actually hit it, which is yeah, perfect. And given the fact that we haven't loaded any premium until right now, it's not bad either. But we now have a few things to consider in this game. There are 2 TDs, but both of them are spotted and both of them are not near us. And there is also the back end of a T95 that's sat out in the open, but there's also an E75 who maybe we'll be able to get one shot into. Can we hit it? Yes, we can. A little bit lucky there to be able to hit that one, so I guess it makes up for my bad aim earlier. And then we get one into the T95, and this is kind of where you want to be, basically. Literally sat there waiting for opponents to make misplays, and you can see here we bounce another one off of the E75 earlier as he hit us, and then we go for the tracking shot on the E75, get a bit more assistance in this game, picking up 4.1 thousand damage and also 1200 assistance, but maybe we can get some more as we close in on the rest of these guys and try and get a little bit more damage to add to our total here. And this is kind of where the Chrysler K is very good. It doesn't take long to kind of turn around and make a move somewhere else because of that good power to weight ratio, like we said. And of course, yeah, it just feels very, very nice. Now we find ourselves a little teeth breaker, and of course bounce off of the teeth breaker. Yay, thank you, thanks Wargaming. And then we go for another one, and then we only track him. Yeah, unfortunate there not to pick up any more damage in this game, but it's fine. We still have a brilliant result, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to continue that as we kind of move along. But yeah, maybe maybe not is what I'd like to say. But either way, yeah, it seems like we're having a good, decent run of games when I've been playing recently, which is brilliant. And hopefully we'll be doing some more videos. But let's jump into the next replay here, which kind of showcases the worst case scenario that you could possibly hope for in the Chrysler K, which is multiple people from multiple sides. Now then, this is of course Lakeville. Lakeville being one of the kind of more interesting maps, I guess, for a heavy tank, because you kind of have to play quite well to make it work. Of course, there's the ridgeline kind of you can go to in F2, so like the valley area, but for the most part, this is kind of not going to work in a Chrysler K. You don't have the gun depression because of the fact that you're rear mounted, and going over there is just not going to be good. So we're not going to do that. we are going to try and push into the town, as it can yield some really nice results, to be honest. And you end up getting quite a bit of damage generally. So hopefully we can get a bit in this game, but you never know. Obviously you could get YOLO'd. We got a little bit of team support in this game, which is brilliant, because that's what you need when you're playing in a tank that can, when it's hitting the side, can be just absolutely decimated. So yeah, hopefully we can keep our armor to the front and be able to deal with some of these guys. But this game doesn't quite go as I hoped for, but it's going to be a good one for you guys to learn what you need to do. Now, unfortunately, there's a light tank pushed in, and we don't manage to get any free damage from him, but maybe we will. You never know. But obviously, the whole point about playing a tank like this is all about kind of making sure that you get what you need to out of the games. And it's really kind of a difficult tank to play and master. It's an easy tank to kind of get used to and an easy tank to do decently in. But when it comes to kind of consistently doing very, very high amounts of damage, it can be a little bit of a pain. Now you can see here we are getting hit in the side, which is not particularly great because nobody has gone in the center of the map, which is not ideal. We over angle there, which means the mutant can get a shot into the side of us. The bog horror is not particularly great. It is a bit of a weak tank. But we are able to kind of hit that weak point, which is kind of the cupola of the vehicle. We are getting absolutely steam hammed in the middle of the map. Obviously, the problem with that is all of these guys. The bog horror just decides to come all the way around and none of the teammates can hit him. I was hoping that, you know, he wouldn't just be able to come all the way around, but apparently he can, and then he comes in and does another shot into us as well. So yeah, this is where the Chrysler K can be infuriating to play, is when you don't get any team support or any kind of help when it comes to that. But unfortunately not able to get a free shot into that guy, but you never know. Hopefully the team should be able to finish that one off. And we've got a tiger over here which we can help out with, and you can see he's obviously not on the most amount of hit points. There you go, nice little auto aim, so close that auto aiming is going to be absolutely fine. We're not going to, you know, get taken out or anything like that. We're not going to miss at that sort of distance. But the game is now looking a bit peak. We've got a T29 who's pushed in towards us, and yeah, I wonder if it's going to work. If we can actually kind of side scrape against this guy, considering he's on full health and he could just YOLO me. We've got to be quite careful in how we play this, but you see here, T29 does decide to come out. We unfortunately hit into the upper plate of the T29, which for most vehicles at tier 8 is an auto pen anyway. But unfortunately for the Chrysler K, it doesn't get the best armor in the world, best penetration in the world. I think it's about 190 on its standard rounds. So yeah, it can feel a little bit annoying when it comes to that, but it's not awful. I'm certainly not going to be saying it's like absolute garbage. It just is not great, and you will be limited quite a bit by that. So you will have to fire premium rounds every now and again, but they are 260 pen on the premium rounds, which makes this tank absolutely crazy and fine to deal with. So now we can start to try and go for the SU-130 PM, which unfortunately he's behind a house, which means that we don't get a shot into him. Yay, just what I wanted. But hopefully we can continue and make it work either way. So with 1500 damage in the kind of game so far, this is kind of what I feel like is the standard of playing World of Tanks. Now you see me here, I'm kind of moving in towards him at a weird angle. That's so that it improves our standard armor of the tank. Now I'm not going to push around that corner because artillery could hit us, and so yeah, and you can see that they are literally sat there with their life in the palm of their like clicker. You know how it is. Basically just sat there fapping, waiting for me to come around the corner. So we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be holding back behind all of the buildings and hope that the artillery can't hit me. You know, World of Tanks probably still can anyway. They're trying to attempt it, but luckily for us we are not a fool, so we do manage to kind of stay behind the buildings and avoid any of those pesky little shots coming in. But with 2,200 damage, you know, it's okay. No one is going to be saying that's an outrageous game. It's probably more of a kind of a fairly standard game for most people. And I think that's kind of where the Chrysler K can be let down, is when you do end up kind of getting into those situations where people can find you from all kinds of directions, and it can be a little bit of a pain to try and play. But with 2,200 damage, hopefully we can get one into the SU-130 PM. And here you go, we're angling again, trying to keep that armor slightly weird. He's going for the inner drive wheel, but because we move forward right at the end, we could actually end up kind of bouncing around, and there you go, we end up bouncing a little bit more, get a little bit more damage, and kind of have the opportunity to maybe have finished off the SU. I mean, at that point we were never going to be able to finish off the game with the most amount of damage and be able to win it, but you know, it kind of showcases that the tank does have its weaknesses, and it certainly isn't the most outrageous vehicle that you ever play, but it is very, very powerful in the right hands, and when you kind of get used to being able to angle a little bit and make use of the kind of side scraping ability that the tank has. So hopefully this video has been good. If you want to let me know how you think the Chrysler K is, let me know in the comment section down below. Of course, if you are watching this in the lead up to Christmas or not afterwards, then I hope you have a fantastic Christmas, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.